I'm going to read you a passage from this book. This is one of his own experiences with awareness during meditation, along his own path of sort of growth and realization. And the setup here is he's in a Hindu temple. He had been wandering a bit, traveling in the world in this way, and began doing what he calls an open awareness meditation. So he tells us, he wants us to sort of realize this also for ourselves. So I returned to the grove near the Hindu temple as my stomach gurgled from hunger. Various emotions surged, for I had taken the refusal of food personally. So here he is working with renunciation and with very few meals. And so he sits down to do an open awareness meditation. He tells us basically all meditations work with awareness. The essence of meditation is recognizing and staying with awareness. If we lose our awareness, we are not meditating. Awareness is like a crystal or a mirror that reflects different colors and angles. Forms, sounds, and feelings are different aspects of awareness and exist within awareness. Or you might view awareness as a guest house. Every type of traveler passes through, sensations, emotions, everything. Every type is welcome. No exceptions. But sometimes a traveler causes a little trouble. And that one needs some special help. The intention when meditating with emotion is to stay steady with every sensation, just as we might do with sound meditation. Just listening, just feeling, no commentary. Resting the mind on the breath can turn breath into support for maintaining recognition of awareness. The same as with anger, rejection, and embarrassment. So anyway, he then continues on. I won't read the rest about his experience sitting there. I'll leave you in suspense in case you want to read this lovely book. It's really full of just narrative forms of teaching, which is it's really lovely how he does that. And so in keeping with, with this is the next Lojong slogan that we've been working through, which is the first of the second point of mind training. And this slogan, the next one on our list, is called, in the intervals, be a conjurer of illusions. Be a conjurer of illusions. Wow, we're being invited to do something that we're actually taught we shouldn't be doing. Kind of freeing here. And there's a good reason why Geshe Chekawa Yeshe Dorji, who's the commentator on the 7-point mind training that Atisha brought to Tibet. Another way to say this is between sessions, be a conjurer of illusions. So the last version in the intervals means between meditations. So, we're being asked to meditate in certain ways. Next week, we'll begin the process of Tonglen as it is in the 7-point mind training, beginning with self, which is part of the teachings. And so that's a very specific kind of meditation where we send forth and receive. We receive suffering and we send forth a sense of openness and brightness of compassion and love to others who are suffering. But before we get there, we are asked to be a conjurer of illusions. It's kind of good news. Basically, we're not being asked not to exist in a world of illusions. Like, don't have illusions. No, of course not. We're not being asked to do that. We're being asked to be aware of them, quite simply. And it may be easier to be aware of the illusions while we're meditating. That's fine, because maybe everything is quiet, hopefully. The mind is quiet. This cage of monkey mind isn't bursting at the seams, or the elephant mind, which is the drowsy, sleepy quality where we sort of lose awareness, we lose awakening, we lose a sense of being awake. And hopefully the monkey isn't riding in on the elephant. That is not a lovely situation, right? Both at the same time. Drowsiness, agitated mind, drowsy, agitated mind. This is the normal state of our mind, right? For many of us, at least part of the day. And so, assuming that the mind quiets, in meditation we have this opportunity to do the practice, such as we talked about last week on non-duality, the eternal present, non-duality, and recognizing awareness is that. So here, now between our meditation sessions, yes, be a conjurer of illusions, but know that you are conjuring illusions. Not that you have to stop doing it, but be mindful in between those sessions of what your mind is doing. In essence, keep the perspective. This is the ultimate meaning, what we might call the external meaning of the slogan. Keep the perspective. Keep the mindful perspective that maybe you've cultivated on the cushion or lying down, and bring that into the intervals between your meditation. Sometimes we'll talk about how, whereas meditation can fulfill a place in our life, it may be this little niche here, and then the rest of our life is this huge swath of activity. And we try to fit meditation and kind of our spiritual lives, whatever those look like, into our lives. And what I often advocate is, let's turn that around. Let's make meditation and our spiritual lives the overarching umbrella, and fit into that. Bring that into the outward directed activities that we're involved with, our work, our families, and everything, so that the perspective is sort of shifted around a bit. And our commitment to that can be this Lojong slogan that is asking us to be a conjurer of illusions, yet be mindful. Just be aware. Now, part of the commentary that's written in this volume is also talking about the 5 aggregates of clinging. And we can briefly kind of go through that, but in Buddhism, this is very central to understanding the psychology, the Buddhist psychology of consciousness and mind. And basically the idea here is that there are 5 kind of gross level processes of consciousness that keep us in a world of suffering. And I had a student one time who in a class had a whole cartoon that she had made about these aggregates of clinging. They're called the skandhas, 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 which means aggregates, or aggregates of clinging, of grasping and then clinging onto them. So they're basically the hooks that keep us attached and therefore suffering. So the skandhas, the first one is form, and we can liken it, according to the student that I had in the class. She said, let's say that the ice cream truck, especially on a hot day like this, is driving down your block, okay? And you look out the window, it doesn't matter how old you are, you can still get excited at the sound of an ice cream truck. And especially if you look at the ice cream that the ice cream person is holding out the window and giving it to maybe someone who came up to the truck. When you see that ice cream cone, it's the perfect cone. It's the one that you would have always dreamed about, right? The form is the first aggregate, meaning that you're seeing something, you're seeing an object. And the second aggregate becomes feeling or sensation. Sometimes it's called sensation, meaning that you either identify it as pleasant or unpleasant. Maybe it wasn't the cone you were hoping for. Maybe it's pistachio. And so, oh, I like pistachio, but not everybody does. Either way, there is some response to it, and that's the second one. So form, feeling, and then perception is the third, meaning this is desirable. I want to get one. I need to get one. I want this. We start having thoughts about it, and maybe even planning how to actually get it. Now, we haven't started going to fetch money out of our wallet or debit card or whatever, and our nowadays our mask to go out to the ice cream truck. But in any case, so the next stage to that, so we've got form, feeling, perception, basically an idea about it, sort of a plan or a thought. And the next one is volition, what we call volition, which is like sort of impulse to now do something about it, to act on it. All of these are what we might call karmic imprints, things that basically are coming from maybe past experiences that we've had and basically imprinted us to respond and react to certain things a certain way that we might call tendencies. Right? So for me, a certain kind of ice cream might be my tendency here. Anyway, so the fourth aggregate, which we might call mental formations, sometimes it's called that, but there is an element to it that is almost planning and acting on it to make it happen. And this is the action that we often associate with karma, cause and effect. And with karma, the word karma literally means action. And so that part of it, what we do then, imprints further tendencies to do it again next time. And so this is very natural. This isn't an aberration of any kind. This is just the mind doing what it does. So that fourth one is pretty key here, because this is where we might take action to either avoid something or to get something and hold on to it, to have that stimulus-driven pleasure of that ice cream cone. Now, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with having an ice cream cone and really relishing it. The point is that we can get hooked into clinging. So the next time we have to have it, and if we don't have it, we suffer. And this is why clinging is usually seen to be a part of the root cause of discontentedness in life and suffering. So the fifth is then consciousness itself. Consciousness itself. And all of these first four are sort of a part of consciousness already. And what consciousness also means is that we have now created an imprint through the clinging, through the grasping, through the cherishing. Ego is part of this as well, the sense of I need something. And so in a way, this part is fairly subtle, but it's also a precursor for possibly doing it again next time. So in Buddhist psychology, there's this understanding of clinging that then leads to a tendency to cling in the same way again next time. Unless the effect of that action is something horrible or negative, and then we fall into aversion possibly. Anyway, but you see how sort of the tendencies that we cultivate become more tendencies. Consciousness seeks to express itself in the same tendencies that we've been cultivating. And so, it kind of is neither good nor bad. It just is cause and effect. And so we can use this relationship of consciousness to things in a wholesome way, such as with meditation. Meditation can feel good. But if we're able to sort of quell and soften those tendencies of clinging, what we find is that the door opens to a much sort of greater sense of awareness beyond just the consciousness itself. Sense of fuller, open, mindful presence. There's no more action, there's no more reaction, there's no more kind of movement or motion. There's a reaction, there's something, a stimulus and a reaction, and a need to a need to then incorporate whatever we're attached to, and to get it, to claim it, to have it and hold on to it and not to lose it. So this also is the case with ourselves. So some of these teachings on the aggregates, the form being our own body perhaps, the feeling, what does it feel like to be in the body? And if we're sort of craving certain feelings about being in the body, satisfying those cravings. It could also be sort of an egoic sense of needing to be in a body in a certain way and to be perceived a certain way. So there's the perception part. And if I'm not being perceived in the way that I would like to be perceived, then the process of mental formations or volition is, how do I actually be perceived the way I want to be perceived, and take steps to make that happen. Again, this is natural. This is just what our mind does, what consciousness does. So in a way, this is the context for the illusions that we find, the illusory nature of what we conjure by projecting onto things, projecting forms onto things. The instruction here in this then, so we understand kind of the issue and the terrain that we're on, but what is the instruction? So how? How do we practice with being a conjurer of illusions? And largely this happens by holding on to mindfulness, holding on to this capacity to simply bear witness as things unfold in a way that's non-judgmental and not reactive. Just an open, mindful presence to ourselves and what we're going through, and what are the impulses arising. What is the sort of cause and effect? Certain things will arise in dependence upon causes and conditions. This is fundamental to Buddhism as well, that things come into being because there are other things that are coming together in a certain way, and we respond to them. And then they disperse, and new things come into being. So we can say this is kind of the philosophical foundation of that, of clinging. And so the instruction is, it's fine. You can project onto that ice cream cone anything you like. But be aware that you are turning this ice cream cone, or you are turning this other person into something they may not fully be, right? But it can be a projection. And then thus a setup for disappointment, however large or small it may be. So mindful presence. It's not saying don't be a conjurer of illusions. You would think that was the teaching, but it isn't. Go ahead, be one, but be mindful of what is arising for you, what you're going through, and kind of what the outcome is. In many ways, we may couch this in mindfulness. These 5 aggregates are part of the mindfulness teachings in the Satipatthana Sutra, which is the Buddha's 10th discourse on mindfulness, where he delivers the teachings on mindfulness. And so these 5 aggregates of clinging are part of that discourse that he offers, this big teaching that he gives on mindfulness. And then following that segment of the teaching is what we call vipassana, or insight meditation, which is where we learn, how does suffering arise? Why is this happening now? What are the qualities that came together to cause me to feel this way? And what did I do maybe that exacerbated them? How did I think about them? All these different inquiries we can make into ourselves without judging ourselves, but just noticing in a loving way, in a gentle way. Why is this coming up for me? That then begins the teachings of vipassana, or vipassana in Tibetan Buddhism, which is more about gaining insights into patterns and watching the flow of consciousness and such. Now, Yongey Mingyur, in the passage I read, talks about a mirror-like quality. And this is where things get interesting. This notion of being a conjurer of illusions from the standpoint of awareness that is so clear and reflective. Awareness is not impacted by all of these things we're going through. It is just simply able to bear witness, but is largely unaffected by what arises, and then what disperses, and then something else arises and disperses. So it's really, it's often what's called mirror mind in Tibetan Buddhism. allowing your mind to have the qualities of a mirror or a reflective lake, the surface of a lake. That, of course, will have ripples in it. Those ripples are kind of the distracting thoughts and such. But the surface of the lake, the water itself remains clear, as does awareness, as does this subtle form of consciousness, despite the formations, despite the ripples in the water. And so when we gain perspective, we're able to hold a sort of a mindful presence as things are arising and dispersing, as these illusions come together, and as they disperse and give rise to new conjurings, if you will. Part of that, the practice here, which we're going to do in about a minute, is being able to hold what we might call multiple attention, or what Leslie, my teacher, calls the simultaneity of our awareness, meaning that we can actually open awareness and hold on to more than one experience at the same time, such as you can experience your physical body as you're breathing. You can feel kind of being in your body as the breath rides in and as the breath rides out. In that moment, you're feeling your senses of being in the body. You're also sensing breath moving through the body at the same time. Possible to do that when your mind is open and calm. You might also be able to notice the one who is simply bearing witness to the body and to the breath simultaneously, and ultimately to awareness itself. That mindful presence is what we call a meta-cognitive awareness, or an awareness that is aware of itself. And that's where the goods are, if you will. That's where things get really good. Because in that space of open awareness, as we're attuning to breath, surrounding sounds, we're aware of a thought arising and dispersing. If we're able to hold an open awareness, sort of this mindful presence, then these things just arise and disperse on their own. We don't have to do anything about them. We shift from single-pointed awareness, what's called one-pointed awareness, to no-pointed awareness, because the awareness itself becomes the point. Mindfulness becomes the quality we abide in, and we notice things, but we're not just anchoring attention. We're able to let go of the anchoring. And in those intervals between meditation sessions, we can abide in the subtlety of mindful presence. That's the teaching. Not to forget. In fact, the word sati means mindfulness. It's a Pali word that means mindfulness. And the literal translation of sati is remembering, recollecting, recollecting mind in awareness. We can also put it that way. Mindfulness is that remembering to be present when we remember to be present. In the words of Sogyal Rinpoche, a great author and teacher. So, multiple attention, simultaneity of awareness, the fact that awareness can take in not just one experience at a time. Concentrative attention, yes, we can focus that on one thing. But open awareness is able to experience a multiplicity of things in one moment. So this is what we'll practice in the time we have left, is diving into this sort of openness, so that when we are experiencing the clinging that comes with the 5 aggregates or some other stimulus, we're able also to simultaneously hold mindful presence. And then we can be a conjurer of illusions and maybe even enjoy it. Maybe even enjoy it without clinging to them. How cool would that be, right?